Okay, next up, we have Chris Johns, who's returning to us. He's taken on a new role since the last time he spoke to us. He is now the Director of Criminal Justice Transformation, and Alexey Togunov, who is the Manager of Project Implementation for the Ministry of the Attorney General. So welcome to you both.
Thanks very much. So I am going to kick it off. I will try to keep this short and sweet and compelling for you, and then I'll turn it over to my friend Alexey. So I'm going to talk primarily about what's going on from a criminal modernization perspective. And if you see me speak in past years, you know I like to get right to the meat of it and talk about what you're going to get out of this. So if you are practicing in criminal law, you will definitely hear some of that from me. On the civil and family side of things, you'll likely hear more from Alexey. That doesn't mean you can tune out while I'm talking though. So I'll just be one moment while I share my screen here. There we go. Okay, so I don't think it comes as any surprise to the folks in the room here that the criminal justice system as it exists today is very siloed. We have multiple independent but interdependent partners in the system who are exchanging information in a number of different ways. But everybody has their own thing. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and we often rely on paper or physical handoffs to move the process forward. So we're working on something called the Criminal Justice Digital Design, which is focused on connections between the police, prosecution and defense, the courts, and then on into corrections and community safety. The challenges that we're trying to solve with this initiative, and this is kicked off now. It's been up and running for about 6 to 8 months, but some of the big challenges are the intake of information and documents. So in today's world, if you're a police officer, you drive over to courthouses pretty often. You're dropping off charge packages, informations, warrants, peace bonds, things like that. And you're sitting in one of our intake courts while you wait for your turn, swearing to things before a justice of the peace, and then we make copies of that. So one copy goes back to the enforcement agency, one of them goes into court services, and we all start tracking the progress of this thing in our disparate systems. The time that it takes to do that can become critical, especially when there are dangerous situations. So we want to speed that up and get the paper out of the system. We have a similar problem when it comes to digital evidence. So each individual police service collects digital evidence in different ways. There's some consistency throughout the province in how we handle that. But everybody's got their own storage mechanism. Everybody's got their own naming conventions. There's limited backups in place in case a system fails. And digital evidence is huge now. And it's only going to grow and grow and grow. Even month over the last few months, there's been tremendous growth. And a lot of this goes to things like the interview room footage, body worn cameras, bystander cell phone, and what's captured on that. We're trying to find a way to make that digital. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but we want to get away from the process of taking what is already digital and turning it into physical media by putting it on a USB or a DVD so that we can use it in the court system. The disclosure process is hampered by some of the same things. It relies a lot on paper and digital evidence catching up to people, multiple copies of the same thing so that Crown's defense and the courts have access to their own authoritative version of what really is the same information in a lot of cases. And often people have to make specific trips to meet other people. And with COVID everywhere now, those in-person interactions present another risk for us. So we want to find a way to get those handoffs moved from in-person and physical to digital and remote. And the last thing is our current case tracking system. So in court services, and if you've been around the criminal justice system long enough, you've heard somebody probably refer to ICON under their breath, likely as a swear word. ICON is the court's case tracking system. It is rock solid, but it's also 31 years old. It turns 32 in a few months. That means that despite the fact that it's rock solid, it is really hard for us to work with in terms of keeping it up to date with what's going on in the world around us and making fast and nimble change to the system. It's also a programming language that it's becoming increasingly hard to find people to support and make those changes for us. So we've got this big agenda ahead of us where we want to connect everything. So our vision is a modernized criminal justice system that enables meaningful data, document, and other evidence files to be exchanged digitally throughout the justice sector participants. And if we do this right, then as a defense attorney or as a Crown prosecutor or as a judge, you have access to what you need wherever you are when you need it throughout the life cycle of a case. So there's nobody tracking down a paper file, or there's no waiting for something to get to your desk before you can move on to your next step. And this is how we intend to do that. So there are really 4 big projects that together will modernize and transform the way criminal justice happens in Ontario today. The first one is our e-intake solution. So you may have heard rumblings about this. There is not a super direct impact to the defense bar on this one, but we've created a digital highway of sorts between police and the courts for the purposes of intake court. And we are creating a parallel digital highway for other enforcement agencies like probation and parole or truancy officers so that they can get things to intake court as well. And what that means is that we'll scoop data from their systems so that they don't have to provide it to us again. We'll pick up the documents when they're ready for pickup, and we'll present them before a justice of the peace so that they can make the decisions that they need to make. And once they've made their decisions, the result automatically goes back to whoever the enforcement agency or police service was, and it automatically creates a new case file in ICON. So we have taken the in-person visits by police out of the mix so that they can focus on their core duties. We've also taken a lot of data entry and keying out of the mix for court services. And this also means now that we have the beginning of a digital case file. It's an actual digital document and the data to go with it. So ultimately, we no longer need to turn that into paper and deal with the paper. From a digital evidence management perspective, the province has actually procured a single digital evidence management provider for the benefit of all police services and other enforcement agencies in the province. What that means is they'll be able to take advantage of our contract and get reduced rates for something that can help them to store, manage, and share their digital evidence over to the Crown Prosecution Service. And it can in turn be used to disclose that through to defense. And that disclosure piece happens with the third column that you're seeing there, which is called the Digital Disclosure and Hearing Hub. So this is the icing on the cake. It will gather up all of the information that we know about an accused or about a case and put it all in one spot for defense attorneys, for Crown attorneys, for court services, and for the judiciary while they're in court events. So you'll be able to log in from anywhere as long as you have a good, reliable internet connection and see any evidence that's been disclosed, any paperwork that's associated with that file, and ultimately any past dates and decisions related to those dates, upcoming dates that have been scheduled, essentially everything that we know that you're allowed to see. And those will be tailored interfaces. So what defense needs to see and how they need it presented before them is different than how a Crown would want to see that or how a judge would want to see that. And we can tailor those interfaces while crowdsourcing the single set of information from all those back-end systems. And the last piece is us replacing ICON. So there's not a lot of glory in that, but it is a big piece of work, probably the most difficult piece of work. We've got an old system with 30+ years of business rules coded into it, and we need to unravel all of that and recreate it in a new system. But we're not building something from scratch. We're using a technology that is off the shelf and can be snapped together to match the day-to-day business and workflows that we have in our courts, while letting us configure some other pieces so that they're easier to use and easier to understand for the people who will need to use them. Over the last few months, we've also accelerated some of the pieces of work or created what we call light solutions. And those are the eHub and the criminal digital disclosure. So eHub is, I like to call it Dropbox for police. It's a way, before we create the intake service, for them to drop off documents to get that to the court securely so that a justice of the peace can review and make their decisions. And it will send information back about what decisions are made. But it doesn't create cases in ICON. It doesn't result in a digital case file. It's not as slick or robust as what the end state will be, but it's working. It's limiting those in-person contacts and making sure people aren't having to drive to courthouses unnecessarily. The other piece has a more direct impact for you, and that is the criminal digital disclosure tool. So in 35 of the municipalities now, 35 of our Crown offices, a light version of that portal we talked about has been rolled out solely for the purpose of facilitating disclosure from Crowns to Defence. So that is up and running. We're already gathering feedback on that as we gear up for a launch to the rest of the Crown offices. So if you're practicing in the criminal area and you haven't seen this yet, you likely will soon if you have an active case before the court. We are taking a very user-centric approach to the service, and a lot of what Rio said in her presentation resonates here. We're gathering a ton of feedback from Defense Counsel and already making improvements to that service for things like the ability to bulk download or some of the nuances that come with two-factor authentication and how that works in the day-to-day life of the defense attorney. So ultimately, if we get this all right, what we'll have is a series of connected systems. And this is a really simplified diagram for what we're trying to accomplish. But if somebody has the information and they put it into their system, then it should flow to all of the other systems throughout the criminal justice sector so that we all have access to it. And in that way, we're not rekeying information somebody already has. We're not waiting for a copy of something that's already digitally available. And we're just logging in and getting our hands on the information we need when we need it and wherever we happen to be. All of this will be protected with robust security and role-based permission. So if it's something you have access to today, you'll have access to it tomorrow digitally. If it's not something you had access to previously, then that access will not be added unless there's a good reason for that. So what does this all mean for the defense bar? I already talked a little bit about criminal digital disclosure, but this means that the need to physically exchange those USBs, DVDs, things like that with your local Crown offices, if it hasn't already gone away, it will be. We're in 35 offices. We've got another 20 locations to go, and that will happen on or around November the 16th. That means we've decreased the in-person contact and the risk of loss in transporting that physical stuff. The digital disclosure and hearing hub, which is the fully featured version of what we're trying to build for defense attorneys, that's our next stop. It'll give you that one-stop shop for all the information that you need about an accused or about an upcoming event or case file. We'll be iterating on that and developing it based on interviews with defense attorneys. And we'll be doing the same thing with Crowns for their version and court services for their version. But it'll support all parties in court, regardless of where they're physically located in the province. So this removes that physical aspect of having to be in a courtroom to get access to some of these things or having to travel to a courthouse to get access to some of this. And then once we've modernized ICON, ICON holds a ton of information. Once we've modernized it, we can connect it to some of these other tools that we're building for defense and for Crowns and for the other players. And that means that even more useful information will start to become available through that hub in the center. So things like next court dates or decisions from past court events, the most recent copy of the information. It'll all be there at your fingertips. You just need to log in to grab a copy of whatever it is you're looking for or to look for the information in the online tool. So that was really everything I wanted to share with you today. I know I've been a little bit light on dates. I am going to turn it over to my friend Alexey. And when we get to the end of this, we'll, if there's time, throw it out to folks to ask us some questions about where we're headed with all this modernization. Over to you, Alexey.
Thanks, Chris. And let me just get my slides up and running. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, it should do it. And all right. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chris. So I work closely with Chris, and as Chris said, Chris is now focusing on the criminal justice side of things and modernizing those processes. And where my focus is on the Ministry of the Attorney General side is really looking at the civil and family side and mainly focusing on those processes. So I'll share with you today what we've been doing, some of the things you're likely aware about that we've been doing with modernizing those processes. So obviously this pandemic, wow, like the last 8 months, 9 months has really been a game changer in terms of how we really live our lives, but also how justice services are delivered. the ministry has really, tried to respond to this new way of life in bringing services online to be able to do as much as possible remotely for when it comes to justice services. And we've been working with partners from across the justice system, obviously, groups like yourselves and the law firms like yourselves that interact with the systems, but also partners like Legal Aid Ontario, and the partners on the criminal side and the policing side, because there's a lot of partners that touch our justice system. So we've been really working collaboratively to make these changes. And our primary focus has been in the last 8 months to try to reduce the need for in-person visits to the courthouse. So how can we continue being able to deliver justice services and be able to continue running the justice system without that, minimizing the need for in-person visits? And what we've really been able to do is accelerate a lot of the things that we had in our pipeline, a lot of the initiatives, a lot of the vision that we had to bring services online and implement those. And what there's definitely agreement with all levels of government is that some of these changes are here to stay. We don't want to go back to the way things were. We want to leverage this opportunity to change the way justice services are delivered for the future and continue moving the justice system forward. So we've been focusing on several key products, as we call them. Some of these you're probably familiar with. Your law firms likely have used them. And so over the next couple of slides, I'll kind of share with you what they are and what is coming with those. So online filing, this is where we are and have been for a couple of years now. You've been able to file documents electronically online instead of having to have somebody file them at the counter. Document sharing and something that we've launched and procured and expedited the procurement of, which is a case line solution, which is really when the documents need to be shared during a hearing, enabling that, right? Allowing parties to share those documents. Case lookup, which is a new search tool that allows you to look up case information online about when certain dates are for civil and criminal cases, right now just in the SCJ. Virtual hearings, so really the expansion of video capacity across the courthouses and courtrooms, as well as the deployment of various technologies like Zoom to be able to conduct video hearings, and a lot of other sort of smaller initiatives. For example, our work with Cleo, your previous speaker, to continue expanding the guided pathways, and also some neat things that we've been able to implement at courthouses like 361 University. If you've happened to have been there in the last couple of months, there's these really neat digital displays, which I'll show you a bit of a screenshot of. So a little bit more about these products and what we're doing. So as you know, online filing or justice services online is something that we've been able to expand in the last couple of months, and we're continuing to expand. You can now file practically almost any document can be filed through this service. You can pay the fees online, you can upload the document, and some of the documents are filed right away. Some of them are submitted, then gets reviewed, and then they get accepted by the courts. And what we're doing is we're going to continue to improve that service and refine it, make it more user-friendly, as well as there's some forms that still can't be filed online, so we're actively working on bringing those online. And what we're doing is we're shifting to a very rapid deployment process where every 6 to 8 weeks, we're hoping to add some functionality to this service, whether it may be some smaller improvements that you might not notice, or bigger improvements that will allow you to actually do something different. The second product, as I mentioned, is the cloud-based document sharing. So this is the new case lines solution that is being piloted currently for civil cases in the Toronto region at 330 University. And then this is a new system that is allowing parties to share documents amongst each other when it comes to a hearing. right? In the past, we'd all used to be able to come into the courtroom with our papers, with our binders, and if we needed to show an exhibit to somebody, we'd have the paper there. But when you're doing things online, we needed a system, and that's where CaseLine comes in. It's a system for hearings, for sharing documents. So it's been piloted very successfully in for civil cases. We've had over 120,000 pages worth of documents already uploaded into the system with the hearings that have used it, which is already quite a bit. And we're currently expanding it to the family business line, also in Toronto. And beginning of next year, we're going to be starting to expand it province-wide. So that's something that if you haven't had a chance to use, if you've not heard about, CaseLines is the tool that we're using. So something that will revolutionize the way hearings are conducted. I also mentioned some of the, again, smaller pieces that are being rolled out. Case lookup, something that we've enabled in August. So again, available through our ontario.ca, that you can find it there under Justice Services Online. You can now look up civil and criminal case information for Superior Court of Justice matters. That might save you the need to call up a courthouse to find out when is a certain matter. So if you have the contact information, the name, and the case number, there is some information that you'll be able to just look up yourself. So we're really up to how do we get more self-services. And I mentioned the digital displays at 361 University. So that is something that we're really excited that is available at 361 University, something that will be then used in the new Toronto courthouse, which is being built. If you've been in that area, you will see it rising almost day by day now. And that's now providing almost near real-time information of where which cases are. So it's got the name of the parties, it's got the room, the floor. So really almost like walking into an airport. If you need to know where to go, that display is now going to help guide anyone that's visiting the courthouse. I also mentioned our work that we're continuing to partner with Clio to expand guided pathways, and really that's helping your clients and some self-represented litigants to understand the legal process and help navigate it. So we're continuing to work with them to making sure the justice system is accessible to all, and also there's changes that are coming as a result of the Bill C-78. So preparing for that, making sure that information that we have available is up to date to reflect the changes that are going to be coming through that. And lastly, I mentioned virtual hearings. So that has been a big shift, as you know, with as a result of COVID-19, and the shift to being able to conduct hearings with participants remotely, right? Whether everybody is connecting remotely for a hearing or only certain parties. We have now various technologies and are continuing to invest in technologies to equip courtrooms and provide the judges, the staff, with the technology needed to be able to appear in hearings virtually. So that's something that is continuing to be a very big change to, again, how we see the justice service delivered in the future. And to kind of wrap it up and also echoing, again, some of the points that I think we've heard from the previous presenter around our approach to continuous improvement and user engagement and how we go about improving our own services. And what we've shifted and are shifting to is a very user-centric approach to improving how justice services are delivered, and our commitment to making it simpler, faster, and better for all services. And the way it works is really centered around the user. So we have these products, they're there, they're working, but we're committed to continuing to improve them. And we will do that by continuing to engage our users. You may have sort of had individuals from my group reaching out to your law firms asking if there's anybody that's interested in participating in usability testing or in user research to understand kind of what are the needs, how do you like our services, where do you see some opportunities to improve. And then based on that, we do some design work. We do also some testing of what we're some of the improvements that we're thinking about. and then we deploy them. And again, very much appreciate some of the feedback that you and individuals from your offices have been sending us around questions around our services, or ideas that you have with our services and where we can improve them, because that's been sort of building our, what we call a backlog of improvements, that then again feeds into the cycle of how we want to be able to improve these services, being able to make it easier to file documents, share documents, and really move the justice system forward into this digital age. So that's it in terms of my presentation, and I think we probably have a few minutes for questions.
Does anyone have any questions for either Alexey or Chris? Chris?
I do. I have one for Chris. You mentioned that with the new disclosure hub, that's going to be accessible to judges. Can you explain why that is?
So the digital disclosure and hearing hub from a judge's perspective will be very different from what Crowns and Defense see. For them, it's more like a hearing hub to pull together information about what event they're sitting on or what events they have moving through their courtroom that day, who the counsel are that will be attending, and anything that they may need to know about that, but none of the stuff that they're not supposed to see. So it's a way to organize their day more than it is a disclosure tool or a document assembly tool in the context, in the Crown and Defense context.
So is it more of a glorified calendar, if I can put it that way? Just because I would see a lot of concerns from Defense Counsel if judges had access to disclosure.
Yeah, no, they won't have access to anything that they're not supposed to have access to. So I am going to stay just shy of calling it a glorified calendar, but the sentiment is there, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, I guess we'll move forward with our program. So thank you both, Chris and Alexey, for joining us this afternoon and bringing us up to date. I'm sure your plates are both very full with all the transitions that we've had to maneuver through. So thank you for your efforts.
Thanks again, folks.